Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Hello, welcome to World Inkers Network. We have a special program today, World Poetry Day seminar organized by us in collaboration with New York Parrot TV and Poets Aloud and Ghana. Thanks you guys for joining us today. We have an excellent panel discussing poetry and healing. And I am Dustin Pickering, as you know me, your noble and honest host. And we're going to go into I'm going to give a little speech, a little bit of an introductory speech to give you an idea of what we're discussing. And then we'll let the panelists introduce themselves and go straight into the questions from there with an occasional, a little bit of an interruption, but with the featured poets in the middle here and there. We'll have a couple of features come on after about a few minutes of talking with the panelists. So my speech, I'm going to do this real quick for you guys, so you guys be prepared. I've thought a lot about love, beauty, and why we love, and who we do, and what factors into that concern. And I don't have any answers. So many beautiful people exist and are attractive, but how many can one love? Is beauty the real hallmark, or do the energies coalesce into some harmonious being of their own? Why then unreciprocated love? The questions are endless. It seems love just bounces around as it sees fit, like a drunk lunatic marching amongst stars. And if the stars are diamonds on a table, love, let's knock them on the floor and protest. But doth he protest too much? It's truly an eccentric question. So why love, and why does love prevail? There are many beautiful celebrities, but I don't develop affectionate love for them. And so beauty isn't the end all here. There must be some filial tie, some marked display of courage, some bond outside of space-time constraints that universalizes harmony between humankind's rage fits. So passion consumes and liquidates the soul, giving birth to room for new things born afresh through the solemn mound of death and dearth. The reason poets write is to engage with that passion through conceptual language. As Heidegger is noted to have suggested, language is the essence of our being and not of our creation. Something within the human mind desires to express its lowly passions through language. We are anxious creatures, and that anxiety is eased by discussion, conversation, and writing. Writing is conveyed into permanence. What more could love be than permanence? What makes a great writer the sustained influence they become? Perhaps, as Emily Dickinson wrote, "'Tis the majority and all prevail." There are no universal rules determining the greatness of a writer, although they must assume the banners of tradition to appeal to in ways that are construed popularly to the imagination. Thanks to all joining us today. We have 4 wonderful panelists. Let's let you guys introduce yourselves for very briefly, and then we'll get straight into the questions. This is about poetry and healing. So let's go ahead and put these guys on the spotlight here, and we'll just get into who they are and what they have to offer. So let's start with ZM Wise.
Hello, good morning, all. My name is ZM Wise. I'm a poet and a multidisciplinary writer, and I also sing as well. And I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ZM. Let's go to Wang Ping. As we know, you're an author, multiple Professor Emerita, and so let's let you introduce yourself as well.
Morning, everyone. I don't know what time is in Ghana. So I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to be here. And I walked into a wrong classroom in New York. It turned out to be a creative writing, and I started writing since then. That was 1987, and so I'm still writing, but I also do a lot of other things: photography, film, and public installation. I have a project. It's called the Kingship of Rivers, and I've been traveling around the rivers around the world to give poetry workshops and make prayer flags with poetry and pledges to protect and love the rivers and our land. And then I will display those prayer flags along the rivers and confluence and all the way to the Everest. And 2 years ago, we brought the prayer flags to Kilimanjaro. And it's very hard trips, but also very, very rewarding trips. And so I'm so glad to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. So our next panelist is, I hope I don't butcher your name here, Wale Okediran. I'll let you say your name. I hope I got it pretty close to.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you. My name is Wale Okediran. I'm a physician by training, but a writer by passion. I've written about 14 novels and one collection of poetry to date, with a couple of biographies. Just last November, an adaptation of a film adaptation of one of my books, was made into a movie and is currently running on Netflix. Streamline. My work now is to organize and supervise African writers. I'm the Secretary General of the Pan-African Writers Association, based in Accra, Ghana. So I do a lot of networking with writers across the African continent in 5 different languages: French, English, Swahili, Arabic, and Portuguese. Just last month, we organized a poetry competition in languages: English, French, and Swahili. And it was a very exciting competition. And so I do more of literary administration now, and also write poetry, fiction, and a lot of travel stories. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us today, all 3 of you. Suchismita Ghoshal will be joining us in about 20 minutes or so, as I've been informed. She's doing another event, but we will be able to get her on in just a little bit. So my first question for our panelists, and we can just kind of have a roundtable discussion if that's how you want to do that. Poets write in solitude. So how can poetry be more communal? How can we communicate with a broader society through poetry, or how can poets communicate with the broader society? So I guess we'll go with let's let ZM start with that.
How can we make it a more communal experience? Let me answer that question with another question. Are you talking about the construction of poetry itself, or perhaps the recitation, perhaps the spreading of the craft itself?
More so the spreading and the expression and experience of poetry, not the writing itself. Okay,
yeah, because I was going to say the construction of itself is a pretty solitary activity. I do think that through modern technology, and that usually it's this wouldn't exit my lips, but modern technology and social media, they've been doing the job for quite some duration. And other than that, I do believe, well, no pun intended, word of mouth. And pretty much just what somebody taught me at a very young age, to walk up to random people, and especially in a bookstore, saying, hey, we have this event that's happening.
Mhm.
Please come join us. You will not regret it. But if you want to spread it on a wider spectrum, I would say that one must think outside the box. You must break many barriers in order to do so, and really just express that, just express the love of it for itself. If in the end, if someone sees you as this passionate human being, it could very well inspire them to do so as well, to not exactly follow suit per se, but to pursue their own passionate love of whatever it is they aspire to do in life. So
Passion. So that's an excellent answer. Passion is the beauty of poetry, and being passionate about it. Wale, what would you say in response? And do you have anything to add to that?
Okay. Yes. Thank you. In Africa, the most of our literature started as oral literature, more of communication and verbal literature, and that is why poetry has a long tradition in many African societies. Poetry has been emerged into music, songs, and so many social activities are usually done with poetry. For example, a wedding ceremony, when the bride and the groom have been ushered into the arena, usually their family history is made into like a form of poetry and sung like a song to usher them into the event. The same thing at ceremonies, funerals. This is more obvious in Hausa and Swahili poetry. Most of the poetry in Hausa and Swahili are sung like music, like songs, and it's like a communal activity. The lead singer will start the song, and the chorus follow, and then the dancers will come into the scene. So for us in Africa, poetry has always been very communal, because most of the original literature in Africa was oral literature before we now started writing them to books. And the other good thing is that the young generation now are now doing what we call performance poetry all over the place. They are usually invited to start off a business seminar or a government event. The first thing that is done is a poet is brought in to do a performance poetry. Is at that point either to a critique of the government, or a sort of advice for the seminar, theme of the seminar. So I think poetry is common in Africa, and is getting stronger by the day. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's wonderful. I think we could learn a lot from that model of communal activity in poetry. So, Ping, would you like to add anything to that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Growing up in China, poetry, like, the Chinese tradition, the poets are just so honored and venerable. And even though I always felt like I have the urge to write poetry, but I was always feeling intimidated until I walked into the wrong classroom in New York. And the professor wrote on my story that you should start writing poetry and novel. And then he introduced me to Allen Ginsberg and Gary Snyder, and I was their personal translators for the entire festival month. And I started writing poetry, and then I started teaching poetry. And the more I write, the more I teach, I realize poetry is our birthright. And because poetry is embedded in cadence, in music, right, as Wale said before. And what is music? It's the bass. And also, like Mr. Weiss, like you're a singer and musician, for all this art performance and music, dance, writing, especially poetry writing, cadence and music is everything. And I'm also, I have also a degree in medicine, and I focus more on our brain, on the neuroscience. And and I'm also very interested in quantum physics, about entanglement, right? About waves and particles, and I combined all these things together, and I'm more and more like like convinced that poetry is life, right? And the moment we're born, right, and we start writing poetry, we sing poetry, we dance poetry, we move poetry, right? And even when we don't think we're doing it, we're actually doing it, right? And that's why I could travel around the world and get people to write the most beautiful poems with people who think they have never written poetry and they have never done any art. They couldn't do it, and they just said, just feel it, right? Poetry lives in the river, in the air, in the wind, in the trees, in life. And then they just started, writing poetry, and they just turned out to be so beautiful, and so powerful, right? And so, yeah, I will keep doing the Kingship of Rivers, and I also say Kingship of Poetry. So it's a great honor to be talking with all of you on the on the panel. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And that's wonderful. You bring in quantum physics and all kinds of different subject matter into the discussion, and so next question is, what benefits could poetry bring to society if populations heeded poets? And I believe ZM, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to elaborate on something that Wayne's just spoken about. I believe that definitely since we exit the womb, we begin speaking, we begin writing poetry. Something I've told you before, Dustin, is that I've often read surrealist poetry and compared it to the imagination of children, and I barely see any difference whatsoever. And it's and something as precious as imagination, especially at a young, tender age, it should not be tampered with. Let them run wild. I mean, because I've read many children's poems and have just been astonished by what they've written. It's
That's why.
it's
That's
quite
why I said to my first class, I always tell my students in college, my job here is to undo everything that you've been taught, right, from K to 12. I'm here to open all the windows and doors that are being shut, locked, nailed, right, for you. Just let your natural talents, your imagination, your passion just to come out. Because you're naturally poets, dancers, writers, scientists. It's all in us when we were born. It's the gifts that's given us.
It's interesting because that comment segues into the question I asked about what benefits could be brought to society if they heeded poets. And I think that in part answers the question. Would you like to add anything, Wale?
Oh, nothing.
I think we said it all right there. That was quite a good way of bringing into that.
Well, I have to tell you that for thousands of years in China, in order to be an officer, official, or working in the government, you have to know how to write poetry. You have to pass the tests that you are like first-rate poets first. And I think that is a really good system. That can you imagine, like all our politicians and government officials who are also poets, who can feel the passion and who know how to imagine, right? And also who know how to express ourselves from the heart, right? And how our whole being, instead of always saying lies, right? Because in poetry, it's really difficult to lie, and the world will be a much better place. The world will be peace. There won't be so many wars going on every day, every minute,
I definitely agree. It would be interesting to, and I'm sure it's been written about before. There's quite a few hypotheses of this are concerned of how this world would be run by artists, considering we view the world in an alternate way, and even as far as to send an artist to space with other astronauts. That's why that's also part of the reason why they have the organization STEAM as opposed to just STEM.
I like that. So thank you. I will try using that.
Because they add the arts, and humanities as well. And it definitely be fascinating. I have no clue if it would be more utopian, but it's worth a try.
Well, it's very possible, because when I started teaching at this very elite liberal art college, I was the only one as the visiting professor of creative writing. And when I left 20 years later, it is a program as big as the STEM program. And every student, there's a saying like, before you graduate, you've got to take a poetry class with me, right? And I think I really changed, and I actually converted a lot of neuroscientists and econ majors into creative writing major, and they did really well. Actually, they became professors, bestsellers, star poets, and so there's a life in poetry, even though it may seem like it's a losing money business, but it's not.
No, it's not. Because the currency is in here.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to also come in here to give my experience in using poetry for healing therapy. Because a few years ago, I was on the faculty of a medical school in Nigeria, where we decided to teach medical students and doctors some creative arts, mostly poetry and painting, because it's been confirmed that poetry has a big role to play in therapy, particularly to hasten recovery among patients. And I was surprised. I thought it was a new thing until I went into the books. I discovered that this one dates back as 400 BC, when Egyptians were using writing as a form of therapy. So we're not new, but I'm happy to say that the idea of using poetry and creative arts, including painting, started catching up with some medical schools and teaching hospitals. It's been discovered that when you have patients who are recovering and you sing to them or read poetry to them, these are soothing to their feelings. And you can also encourage them to put their feelings into poetry or into painting. So some of these things are practical and work.
And I definitely agree that in a data-driven world as we live in, it's machine run and everything. It's good to remind ourselves that we're people that feel as well, and not just process things and go through the machine world. And I think blindly, a lot of times a lot of our inhumanity is from, I think, losing the fact that we don't focus on creativity as much as we used to in previous eras, where it seems like now, the problem is that people are so consumed with information rather than wisdom, and I think the arts and creativity can help manufacture a sort of mind that discerns more than, say, just consuming news articles and rather than than just looking at them from a perspective of, obviously you want to be able to discern between, what is being said and why it's being said. There's so much out there now, so much information that's an agenda that's being pursued or being pushed. It's not so much the sharing an idea or sharing a worldview. And once you get to discerning that, and you can use your mind in a way that's creative and think more deep on subjects, I think that actually is more effective. And poetry and the arts can teach people to think human, be human instead of trying to be machine. I think that's probably the case from my experience.
Well, a lot of my students came to me because they were on the verge of dying, or killing themselves. And so I was also known. So my class was filled with such students, and I had so many letters from my students saying, "Thank you for saving my life," and I'm so glad, Wale, that Africa, in Africa, they're training doctors and scientists to become poets. And actually, a lot of my neuroscience students and physics and chemistry students, they told me that how taking poetry helped them do science much better, right? And sometimes, a lot of times, they would send me letters thanking me to, they actually, when they apply for research jobs or grad schools, which is very competitive in America, that they just use the poems or stories that they wrote in my class, and they got interviews and got hired. And they were told directly, "We hired you because of your story and the poems you used, that you really stand out," right? And that is exactly what Dustin said before, that you are not machine. You are human beings with hot blood and heart pumping, right? And there's a reason, because our neuroscience, right? Like emotions, right? The area, right? Poetry goes straight. Everything is about, to live is really about to express ourselves for communication, to persuade someone that, you're part of them, right? You're good, right? And you're alive. And the best, what goes straight to the persuasion to our brains, right? Area, is actually through poetry and through arts, and not through, the front lobe, like the logic, but through emotion, And what works better than art and then poetry? Singing, music, right? And dance, the body language, right? What is body language? It is dance, right? We dance constantly, And so, yeah.
That segues into my third question, which is, how do readers relate to poetry in an act of their own healing? Anybody have any insights to throw out? Not just even if it's personal, like if you're reading a poem, how do you relate to the poem and your own mental capacity to feel catharsis and feeling of relief, maybe even reading a poem when you're maybe in a troubled period in your life, and you sit down and you read something and you pick up a poem and it just speaks to you in that moment. Does anybody want to throw in the first in this question?
I can go first. Again, through my neuroscience research and also quantum theory, right? So in medicine, the pain is extremely individual, right? Your pain is your pain. Nobody else can really feel, can actually know how you suffer, right? And but we can throw a bridge across the abyss, right? That bridge is through poetry and music, right? So that's what we call relate, right? And when people feel the vibe, and it is also energy in quantum physics, right? The particle, the wave energy, right? Just constantly going, going, going. And once we latch on it, then we can relate, right? And we identify, right? And we can feel, right? We can feel the pain that you go through, and that becomes my healing, right? And that bridge of poetry and art is so important, for the to across the abyss, there are so many endless abysses that we live, right? In isolation, right? So without poetry, without art, we really feel very isolated, you know. So
Yes, I can add to that from my own experience as a physician. And when we see patients with a traumatic experience, it's like rape or motor accidents that was near fatal, they just survived. Uh, Maybe in a crash, in a motor crash, maybe the fellow was the only survivor out of 5 other people. And when he's recovering, they usually flashback, this flashback experience when they sometimes start screaming at night, scream or shout or get agitated when they hear the sounds of a moving vehicle. But after a couple of days of poetry being read to them or music, sometimes they also engage. I mean, we try to let them participate in the poetry. So when you go to the bedside of the patient and you read poetry to them, you now ask them to also read back. By the third day of it, they become very versatile in also reading this poetry or singing the song that touch them. And this makes them to start getting out of this traumatic experience. Their feelings are getting calmer now. They become just soothing feelings all over them, and they feel calmer. And some of them now we encourage them to also keep a diary or to keep a journal. Let them start writing about their feelings from day one, after the accident or the sickness, second day, third day. About a week after, you can ask them to read the journal they have kept, what they have written down in their diary, and you'll be surprised at the improvement in their feelings from the very traumatic feeling they had before. The words that come out are gradually becoming calmer, more soothing, and sometimes they start laughing. And so these things are very practical, and it works. And funny enough, again, I stumbled on the fact that the Greeks, the god of music in Greek mythology, Apollo, is the same god for music, for poetry, and for medicine. And the answer was that while poetry soothes the mind, medicine takes care of the body. And that's why the Greeks used Apollo as their god of both.
Interesting. They had a lot of wisdom that they managed to put poetically and through the myths and their creations. It's really fascinating how that works for me. I've read quite a bit of the mythology, the Greek mythology, and just find that so much allegory and all kinds of interesting, wisdom there. Ziem, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, hopefully I don't repeat what has already been said, but no. In my own personal experience, I would say that it really depends on each individual piece, whether or not it's meant to make you relate or not. As we know, the arts are, I don't want to say completely, but almost completely subjective. And the reason why I say that is because there are certain pieces that are only meant for one meaning, and that's by the command of the artist. Sometimes they don't want you to take it into a different direction. But I also say that as artists, we only have so much power. In the end, it is up to the reader, listener, viewer. They hold more magic in their mind, in the palms of their hands, than we do. We just hold the tools to the craft. And as far as relating, well, I think each separate experience holds its own. It holds its own form of just relating to that particular experience. Maybe we integrate it into said piece, maybe not. Maybe it drums up a completely different set of experiences for us. In the end, I do think it's situational.
So our fourth panelist has joined us. Suchismita, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself so we can be acquainted. Maybe I'll ask one of our questions and repeat so you can say a few things.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. A very good evening from India.
Nice to see you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I am Suchismita Ghoshal. I am belonging from West Bengal, India, but currently living in Delhi, India, for the purpose of my MBA studies. Apart from my studies, I'm very much keenly interested into poetry writing, story writing, creative writing, content writing, listening to stories, also poetry recitations. And I'm a humanitarian by nature who is constantly promoting global peace and environmental betterment. And through this, I hope to be reaching to all the people, who are trying to do better for themselves across the globe. And this is me. Thank you very much for having me in this stage.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. I want to go ahead and ask you the question that we just asked, which is, how do readers relate to poetry in an act of healing? And I'll let you answer that.
And what I feel that poetry itself is a healing source. It has the therapeutic message in itself, as we carry emotions, as different type of emotions. Like when we are happy, as writers, when we are happy, we try to write poetry, or we try to write some lines for goodness. When we are sad, we also try to express all our emotions out from our writing. And we always are very much what should I say, like expressive. And poetry itself carries all those emotions and all those expression in itself. And it is bettering the feelings of people. And this way, I think poetry and healing can relate very much. And we can achieve the higher selves of ourselves. And this way we can achieve healing or mental peace.
It's an excellent answer. And I find, my personal experience is that when I'm having a personal crisis and I actually sit down and start writing something, I feel like it's almost a sacred moment. Like my feelings are being transformed into something tangible and beautiful that I can actually point to and say that this experience was awful, but this beautiful thing came from it. So I believe we've reached the middle of the panel. So I think we have some time for a couple of featured poets to read. I'm not sure who we have on deck here, but do we have the Poets Aloud, a couple of guys from that organization who want to do a couple of poems for their presentation? I think we have time for maybe 2 people doing a couple of poems each. Is anybody available for that? Okay. So I guess we have some issues with people not paying attention or something. I'm not sure what's going on, but you guys out there who were part of the Poets Aloud meeting, the Poets Aloud organization, are you guys available to talk, do a presentation real quick here in the middle of the feature? I guess we'll come back to them a little bit later. Sorry about that, everybody out there watching right now. We'll get back to them in a little bit. So I had an interesting question. It's sort of like a quasi-academic, I guess you could call it. So Aristotle claimed that tragedy arouses pity and fear to perform a catharsis. And in what ways do you think that poetry can fulfill that definition of tragedy? You want to go first, ZM?
Sure. I've met great many people on both sides of the spectrum and more. It's poetry is only deep rooted in fear, trauma, and tragedy. Only the best pieces are written in that regard, and the other half claims, well, not necessarily. I think it's more beautiful when it's not so melancholy and despondent all the time. But again, not to sound like a broken record, but I do believe it's subjective. I do believe that some of the best pieces are deep rooted in tragedy and fear, and sometimes it can spawn an even greater work that evolves into an even larger piece that focuses on an entirely different direction, and we might not expect it. No, I do think that, from certain events, I'll just give one. Kaddish by Allen Ginsberg. It's his mother, rest her soul, was not only deeply disturbed, but she struggled with mental health for almost her entire life. And I mean, Allen did get to know her when she was a tad more lucid, and and her stay at this asylum, as well as her unfortunate passing, inspired Kaddish, which is the Hebrew prayer of mourning. And and as you know, there are about three or four parts. Same with Howl, and they explore different areas of the subconscious, as well as his own mother's death. He has a way of turning a phrase and making it more universal. He combines the universal and personal, and sort of hands it to you, bequeaths it unto you as a gift. It's yours to do that as you wish, and I think that's, to me, that's one of the finest examples of tragedy turning into this pseudo epic, if you will. And I think that was one of his greatest gifts to us.
Absolutely. Ping, would you like to offer anything and insights on that question?
Yes. I'm sure everyone has noticed that there's not much literature writing about happiness, because happiness is its own end. you feel happy, that's it, right? You reach the goal. But why there's so much literature, poetry, art about sorrow, about tragedy, right? And it's, my favorite writer from South America, Bohings, he has an essay on blindness. He says, because happiness is its own end, but tragedy, we have to transform and transcend tragedy and sorrow. That's where poetry and art comes in to help us transform pain and suffering into something as the fuel for our lifelong journey. That's all. That's what I've been doing, and that's what I've been teaching. That's what helped all my students and a lot of people to get through all the tragedy and catastrophes and sorrow, and help them to get strong and become a new person.
Absolutely. So, Suchismita, would you like to add anything to that?
Um, uh, I would like to add something like I have all this time recalled that one incident in which I was trying to recall. So there was uh, on this context, I would like to share one incident. It was a very famous incident shared in a journal of London. There was a girl in London who was very much sick, and when her parents came to the doctor for a checkup, and they could not actually identify the reasons of her illness. They tried every possible way to make her gain all her health again. But what happened that they contacted after 1 or 2 months, when they saw that their girl is continuously deteriorating, so they contacted with a psychologist or someone like psychiatrist, and the girl just went to the asylum, and the doctor just took her for a week, or I guess some more time into observation before medicating her through several of things. And what they saw that the girl who was totally unable to walk and eat something, she was like walking after a week. She was going to the garden. She was plucking, sorry, not plucking, she was gardening and doing all those things. And what happened that when after 1 or 2 months she completely became fine, and the doctors, and there was a meeting between doctors and the parents. They called back the parents, and the parents came, and they just were discussing about these things, and the girl told what actually happened miraculously, that she became all fine. Then the girl told that she had read the entire book of Gitanjali, which was written by world famous poet Rabindranath Tagore, our Kavi Guru, who got the Nobel Prize in 19 something. Say, I have forgot the year, but he was awarded the Nobel Prize for her book Gitanjali, and he himself translated this book. So it was a great example that how can poetry or how can a literature heal the mind, and how can it actually influence the minds. So you can already see that it is a very true incident, and it is a live incident or live example of how poetry can transform your lives from tragedies and make it a very better thing to enjoy. And you can actually not survive your life, you can actually live your life. So it was one experience I would like to share, and I just shared.
That's an excellent example. It's good to have some
Yes.
more than theoretical. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Can I come in now?
Yes.
Dustin. Yes. Yes, I mentioned earlier on that in Africa, many of our poetry is already set into music. People read their poetry like a song, and some of these songs are used at funeral ceremonies. For example, you go to a funeral where a young man died, and the wife and children are in sorrow. And here comes this traditional poet who starts singing his poetry to them. He sings about the how good the man was when he was alive, all his good attributes, all his activities, how he became a good man, and all kind of things, his achievements, and all his exploits are set into poetry and music. And by the time the funeral ceremony is over, you will see a widow that has been very in a very bad shape, getting calmer. The children are trying to manage one or two smiles. Sometimes this poetry can also be set into a comical or in a clownish way, and people start laughing just after crying, and you see the change, the transformation that poetry can bring into a situation where there is tragedy. And the other one that is very closely related to my own work as a physician is when you see patients who have terminal illnesses. They know that they have cancer, or they have something that is not manageable again, and they know the outcome is very bleak. But after a couple of days of going to their bedside to read poetry to them, or even asking them to also read with you, or to sing with you, or to paint, you can ask them to you give them a blank sheet to put their feelings on the paper, on the page, and then you see this gradual transformation in their feelings. Even though they may feel that, well, there's still nothing they can do for their illness, but their last days are spent in peace and a very soothing psychological and physical environment. And that is why poetry and literature are now on the curriculum of many medical schools, particularly in the US. Many medical schools in the US now put the teaching of poetry and literature into curriculum for medical students, because they know that a medical doctor who is also a poet is better than someone without that the double advantage. Because while the medicine takes care of the body, the poetry takes care of the mind. Thank you.
Thank you. That's excellent. I think it's a good outlook for poetry in general, with more people reading and now than it has been in many years. And I think people are much more interested now. And I think a lot of times depression and a lot of mental health issues can be compounded stresses that just build up, and just you get overwhelmed. And when you're able to sit down and write and think, it gives you perspective, and it helps you kind of like purge those feelings out. And at least gives you room to feel and think and come up with solutions to your problems. When you're so stressed out and things seem overwhelming, you sit down and write stuff out and get your feelings out that way. It helps. The art of analogy is so powerful that it can lead you to personal revelations that you may not have been aware of before. So go ahead.
I add something. A lot of brain diseases, right? Mental health, especially the Alzheimer patients, they lost their memories, right? But the certain part of the brain never loses it. That is the connection to music and poetry, right? And also the part of the brain that stores our memory and process our memory, right? And that's one of the very few parts of brain that keep growing. And what does it say, right? And that's also the most important part of the brain that help us to create art, poetry, music, dance, right? That part, of course, dance is connected to another part of brain that controls motion. That's something different. But poetry and music especially, and also art, that almost like they don't lose it. They don't lose the function, which is also connected to identify us as human beings, like who we are, right? We are to what marks us to be alive as human beings is actually our memory, our emotions, our ability to keep writing poetry and create art, right? And what does it say about this, right? It's just everything, like identify who we are, right? We
Right.
can be economics, we can be bankers, scientists, we can make a lot of monies, but ultimately what marks us as human is this ability to store, process memories and create, beauty, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring out one of our open mic performers up and give him a couple of minutes to read a couple of pieces. That's Sanka Sin, and then tell us a little bit about yourself and read a couple of poems, and we'll love to hear him. Looking forward.
Hi Dustin, how are you? And hello to everyone.
Doing great.
Hope I'm audible quite okay, right? It's fine.
Yes.
So it's a very interesting show today. Like I have been getting a lot of great ideas from different people across the globe. Yeah, before I start reciting, I would like to also give my view on like why like 2 or 3 years back I also kind of came back to the writing area. Like the thing is like yes, definitely. As you slowly age, for me, I'm just giving my view. Like, okay, you have kind of you have a family, you have reached maybe your milestones which you have achieved, your like your milestones which are really set for your life. You have achieved them, but still you see that days have been numbered and. Things are kind of like coming to an end. I mean, you can see the end of the tunnel maybe, and then you realize, okay, what should I leave back in this beautiful world? I cannot take anything along with me, but I have really learned a lot of things, and I have gained a lot of experiences. I've been really understanding people's mind. So what if I just convert them into some like writing and keep them for the next generation? So then I think this thought comes and you feel like okay to leave behind something even though you are not there. So to me, I kind of came back to writing because with a vision that okay, let's keep something behind in this world, and luckily I was kind of appreciated by a lot of people, and then the journey again started. So keeping this thing in mind, I will just read a poem from my book. It's like a collection of feelings published in India, Kolkata. And now, actually, I'm sitting now in Germany because I stay here. I've been like staying here for last almost 19 years now, and that's why I kind of come across writing a book in three different languages: English, Bengali, and German language. So keeping this immortality alive, I would just like to read a poem. It's called Immortality of the Unknown. Being practical, lost are those who never come back. Craving heart, endless, and fall back. But yes, yes, they do come in lost memories. Remembrance, visions truly bear life's best histories. Look at me. Will I get another life? Will I ever come back to my garden of hope and listen my favorite track? The touch of comfort is what I always miss. The hope to re-exist will fade and adequately cease. Some say there's rebirth, you get another chance. Others say fall in love with your present life with true romance. Live immortal in all your work, desiring to exist even after life has withdrawn. At least you can live in minds of many, even though you are long gone. The question of one's identity crisis, the sole purpose of life, have no conclusions to which I could possibly arrive. Which God can answer, which science can prove, the concept of immortality, which we could possibly approve. Ages have always searched the truth of life's mission, the truth which we live into, but not read nor listen. Let be me remain immortal in all unknown perceptions. At least something to relive into to satisfy all immortal obsessions. Thanks a lot. So this speaks about like why did we actually come to this planet and what is actually our identity. I mean, who are we? And let's say for me, who am I? I mean, it's a very popular question. I think everybody at some point of life really have to ask himself or herself this question: what is his or her identity? And where really this journey goes. There are a lot of religious answers to this. There are a lot of scientific explanations to this, but uh, those are all theories. And unless and until it really happens in your life, in your understanding, in your consciousness, um, it's very difficult to really like kind of establish that. Some really believe on faith and move forward and take it as a positivity and a positive energy and move forward. But I think this is a very important question. Who am I? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sanka, for your insights and your poetry. We have another performer here with us, Jing Jing Yang. Would you like to give us a couple of poems from your work?
Sure, Dustin. Thank you. Thanks for
Good to see you.
Olawuyi. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to read one of the poems from my newly published book, The Flowers in My Dreams. I am right now I'm on my second term as a Cupertino Poet Laureate and as the first immigrant Poet Laureate. So I'm very honored to read poems over here. This is the one I really like what Wan Ping was saying, that the poem is a healing process which transforms the suffering, the awful things into happiness. So here we go. A poem is older than the sea. Poems accumulated everywhere. Sky, river, men, women, eyes that don't speak a word, the scar on the forehead, marking an accidental argument, a drawer full of yarns, knit the woolen dreams, keep the thoughts from freezing, the mood behind the characters is a fisherman guarding a 1,000-year boat, eagles swooping, fishnets endless. From morning to evening, both rarely breathe, rushing towards the kerosene. There are waves and wind, time surfaces. Years stroll by, and silence still writes a poem that is older than the sea. Thank you.
Would you like to share another one?
Sure. This is the one. Okay. It's called Logograph. This is a poem that I dedicate to my grandfather. He's a person who can read the script on the turtle shells. It's called Oracle. Logograph. A tribute to my grandfather Yang Shuda. Grab a handful of Chinese characters, toss them into the heat, erupt them into lava, cast them into my poetry. Black script on white paper, brewing and diffusing the stream, flaming in red hot orange, whilst our ancestor sharpened the stone, paint the fairy tales, engrave the memory on turtle shells in cattle bones, scattered with the sparkle splash. Scripts started before time, blistering as blood and sweat. With the stem or pebble, it rocks wolf skin and rolls into human history. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining you.
Thank you. Thank you for meet everyone.
Great to see you. So we're going to continue with our discussion a little bit here. And my first question in the second half of the panel is: poetry a positive medium to explore and alleviate trauma in one's personal life? So let's go with Suchismita. Would you like to try that question first?
Can I again please get the question?
Is poetry a positive medium to explore and alleviate trauma in one's personal life?
Poetry definitely is a very good medium to understand what exactly is going in our life. And when actually we are distressed or somewhat stressed, depressed, or sad, or whatever, our thought process work in a way where we are actually in a state to write something, or all our emotions come out in a way where we become somewhat writers. I mean, if we are already not writers, we became writers at that point of time. Even sometimes therapists also tell us to draw something or to write something to pour out all our emotions, just because we need to go ahead with a less burdened brain. And I believe that art and literature and poetry has always been a very good medium to understand what we have faced in our life, and also in great mediums of books. Like we have read a lot of romance books, a lot of drama books, and all those things, novels. So they always try to make us relate what we actually face in our real lives. I mean, it is inspired by real lives only. So it somewhat is interconnected when we actually try to assimilate all the things we get in our life with poetry or with literature or something, and finally go to in a stabilized position where we feel like, no, this is the time we should be enlightened ourselves with all those positive feelings and positive therapies which can be achieved through poetry and through the medium of any kind of art or creativity only. So yes, it definitely makes us a way forward towards understanding our own emotions, our own life's situations.
I absolutely agree with you. I think it puts things into perspective.
Thank
As I mentioned earlier, analogy is a powerful tool to kind of, when you're comparing and contrasting things in your mind and creating a poem, it definitely leads to a kind of revelation and an interesting thought process that can present you with even possibly solutions. I know there's a book by Rafael Campo. He was a physician, or he is a physician. He talks about how he helped treat HIV patients with poetry. He would share poetry with them and then have them write, and they would open up to him. And it's things like that that really make it what it is. So does Wale or Ping? Do you have anything to offer for that?
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Wang. You go first.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you.
I'm also we're colleagues. I'm also a practitioner too.
I don't know whether it's Wang or Wale. So
Yeah, Wang and Wale. Yes.
so
I
like I
can
just
go to your hospital and teach some poetry.
okay, great. So I was just trying to emphasize again that poetry is a summation of feelings and emotions from all over the body. You're talking about your heart, your head, your body, and definitely it's a very good medium to take care of issues that need to be solved through therapy. And luckily, poetry has also been adapted into different forms now. We mentioned the issue of technology earlier on. We now have young writers who do performance poetry through their social media, Twitter, WhatsApp, and all Facebook, and that has even made poetry to be more universally accepted, and people even put it on their mobile phones, and you can also check on many of these streaming platforms where poetry is used for so many reasons, and it's becoming more accessible by the day. By the flick of a button, you can link up with a platform that is dedicated to poetry that can ease off any problem you have. And also because now people set poetry into music is another very beautiful way. And I think a few years ago, the Nobel laureate in literature, the Nobel Prize in literature was given to a musician, and people were saying, "Oh, what has music got to do with literature?" And the fellow said, "Look, it's my poems that I set into music, and so I'm equally qualified to win the Nobel Prize." So you can see how versatile poetry is now, and it's something that we need to encourage all over the place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wale. It's beautifully put. And I want to add, I want to talk about poetry as a media, right? And so for me, poetry, number one, the first element for poetry is music, because it comes out of music. And as I said before, it is embodied, the cadence, right, is embodied in poetry, right? And so the second element, which is equally important, is the image, right? Which is, music is an art through time because of the cadence, and image is an art through space, right? And also, of course, time is related too in that. And so poetry immediately, even though we write poetry on paper, it used to be the longhand with pen, and now it's computer, right? But the media itself is so like embodied with the music and visual art, right? And of course, it's directly connected to our five senses, and also our front lobe, the thinking, because it's using the language, right? Which the brain for language is like scattered all throughout our brain, right? So it's actually writing a poem and thinking a poem or visualizing a poem or singing a poem is actually we are invoking every part of our brain, basically, right? And so you can imagine the healing process of writing poetry and how important for us to do this, to have this exercise, right? And also necessity to feel alive, and in medicine, again, to feel alive is basically equivalent to actually be alive, right? Feel is directly feel, is about touch, about everything else, right? The five senses and the sixth sense, and so I've treated many patients, like who the mental health patients, and also actually people who have other organ illness, right? Heart issues, lung issues, you know kidney issues, right? And in Chinese medicine, right, the five organs, all the organs we are actually related to emotions. For example, the heart, our heart is fire, red, and related to corresponds to the emotion of joy, right? And our lungs is white and metal, and corresponding to the emotion of sorrow, and that's why we cry, right, when we feel sad. And then our liver is our general, and which is very quick to the temper is very quick to rise, and very easily to be depressed, right? And so it's the fire up and down, and it's in nature it's the tree, the wood, right? And our kidney is water. The color uh, is black, and the emotion coming to our kidney is fright, and so that's why when we get scared, we pee, we lose our control, right? So, so if we can allow these organs, our emotions, to be fully expressed and transformed and transcended, we should not be sick so easily, right? Our balance, our body will be our brain, our emotion will be in a good place of balance, right? And so, yeah.
I want to ask,
Um,
get ZM on
um,
this question real quick.
I will just take a moment to appreciate what Wang Ping ma'am just said, that it was a wonderful interpretation which I learned today, that Chinese medicine always tells about the interconnection or the link between our abstract or different type of emotions with corresponding to its different type of organs. And it was a wonderful learning today. I just noted it down
Thank
in my
you.
phone only. It was a wonderful learning for me. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us
Thank
this
you.
insight.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
I'm
so
so
much.
learning from everyone. It's
much.
wonderful.
It's a really special experience we're having with this group. It's wonderful. And World Poetry Day is today. And so, ZM, would you like to add anything? Our question was: is poetry a positive medium to explore and alleviate trauma in one's personal life?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's a yeah, I think it can be used in many different components. And though alleviation in general may be temporary, I believe there is a way to sustain such alleviation that stems from poetry itself. And no, I do believe that that it can. It does have that power, like almost anything else. Like for example, like hypnosis or primal scream therapy. You have to believe it in order for the incantations to work, as it was. I believe that poetry does contain that power. I mean, it's been it's been so widely regarded as a form of incantation. There's spells. I believe Ted Hughes once spoke about that. He said that poetry is it's pretty much like a magic spell or an incantation. These verses are expressed through shamans, and they and the lines of verse, whether in order or not, can be used. It can be utilized in such situations. Yes.
Absolutely, I love that, bringing in the shamanism and the incantation and the magic spells and so forth. That's an excellent point to bring in. So this brings me to my. Oh, would you like to say something, Jing?
Yes, I would love to share with you my experience. So
Okay.
I was nominated as a poet laureate in 2000. So that was in March, and right after Mother's Day, in May 2000, my mom passed away. That was a very shock news for me. And I'm in San Jose, United States, and pandemic was happening. I couldn't even go home. Till now, I couldn't go home. So I was washing my face with the tears in the past 2 years, and that's why I published this book. It's mostly dedicated for my mother. Because I was crying every day. Oh, I have so much guilt, and my emotion was just my heart cannot contain the sadness. I went to see psychologist. I made psychologist. The only way was through writing. So this year I feel a lot better. The last 2 months I was editing my cover page with a lot of graphic design. I find my emotion has calmed down. But during the time, the past poet laureate Casey sent me a poem that just make me. I want to share that poem with you, so you will see how poetry can transform from one side of feelings to another.
Mm-hmm.
This one is called "Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep." Do not stand at my grave and weep. I'm not there. I do not sleep. I'm in 1,000 winds that blow. I'm the soft falling snow. I'm the gentle shower of rain. I'm the fields of ripening grain. I'm in the morning hush. I'm in the graceful rush of beautiful birds in circling flight. I am the starshine of the night. I am in the flowers that bloom. I am in a quiet room. I am in the birds that sing. I am in each lovely thing. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I'm not there. I do not die.
Wow. Who is that poem by?
I think there was author, but now when I search on my cell phone, it says author unknown. But it was a very famous poem.
Wow. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry for your loss as well. I know what you must be going through. When my grandmother passed away, poetry was my savior as well. Something that I really felt strongly about. I actually wrote a poem during that period, so it was very helpful for me to do that. So that kind of brings me to a second question. Does poetry shape personal revelation, and can one act on those revelations found in one's own poetry? So let's start with Wale. What do you think?
Yes, thank you. For the first time, I will say I don't think so. Because, we poets and writers, we are idealistic people. We believe in perfection, in order, in everything being in the right place at the right time. Unfortunately, the world is not like that. Even though we dream of perfection, we dream of idealistic situation, I still believe that the world is not that simple. And that's why sometimes poets find it difficult to be good politicians. poets uh, Poets who go into politics sometimes usually go into a difficult terrain, because it's now idealism versus reality. And I look at our poems and poetry like a dream. When you sleep, sometimes you have a lovely dream of everything looking so beautiful and orderly. Whereas when in the real life, things are not like that. So for me, I would see poetry as, while not being an exact outcome of your feelings and aspirations, I would use it as a goal to be reached, something that you want to aspire, a very high level of expectation, which is also good in its way, because that makes you to try and improve and aspire to move to the idealistic position. Although in reality, you may not reach there, but at least it's a goal that one should strive to reach. That is the way I will look at it.
Next one. I think it's interesting, as we started the program earlier, we're talking about if poets were politicians, we might live in a better world. So does anybody want to kind of elaborate on this question and maybe bring in that specific element to the discussion?
Yes, certainly. Yes, sort of elaborating on what I was saying before. I do believe that perhaps the elaborate construction of a particular piece, it could stem either from a dream, or perhaps poetry itself may act as an epiphany in and of itself. I've experienced this many times. I can honestly say that. And the general making of a piece, that it can perhaps influence the dream even more. Perhaps it can steer it into a completely different direction. I find that when reading a certain piece, whether it's mine or like someone else's, it provides a completely different perspective each time. I barely recognize my writing as times go by anyway. And I know I'm not alone when I utter that sentence. So it's I think it's fascinating that occurs, and sort of bringing it back to the it's the hypothetical element of if the world is run by artists, what would that be like? I think through these dreams in verse, I think it can help deter us away from not all negativity, of course, but I think a great deal of it. It can help us stave it off and focus on making these, like I said, these dreams in verse, these revelations, these epiphanies come to fruition. So.
Absolutely.
Can I say something about dream and
yes.
So So I want to question what is reality, right? What we think what reality is or is not, right? And what is dream, right? And I think a lot of politicians actually they're so disconnected with the so-called reality. They are like basically in a very illusion in a world of illusions, and that's why they make so many terrible, horrifying mistakes, whether unconsciously or consciously. But coming back to poetry, I think poetry is a tool to allow us into the real world of dream, right? And for me, the dream world has been so neglected, right? When we are awake, right, our like front lobe world, our logic mind takes over, right? And but when we sleep, the front lobe is basically disembodied, and our dream world and other parts of the world I call the real world really comes out. And I actually give specific assignment to my students to they have to take dream journals, right? And just wake up upon waking up they have to write down immediately what they dreamed about. And but writing down the dream is not the purpose, but just a tool to allow us to start making lucid dreams. That to use our dream to write real poetry, to tap into our emotion world, which has been so suppressed by our front lobe, by our logic mind, right? And so for me, writing poetry and making art is the job of like almost like being a witch and being a wizard. This kind of like spiritual dream world, right? And dream work, right? To be an artist is to be a dreamer and to be what do you call it? A visionary or witch, you know? And otherwise, we just write whatever the propaganda, you know, the so-called real world, you know, told us what to do, how to think, how to behave, right? And that's why poetry really like grounds us into the ground, into the other reality, right? Into our dream world, you know, into our consciousness. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Suchismita, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. As per the question, I thought that we should first know what revolution is. Revolution is something, an initiation of transformation or a change from a long rooted or deeply rooted thoughts, and its transformation from the current scenario or current changes. And now we need to know how poetry can relate to revolution. Poetry, as per my sense, has always been a form of something which is very real. Sometimes, if we are dreaming something and writing something about our dream world, poetry also helps us to find the reality. I mean, if we are healing to think about the dreamy world, it is also one kind of healing revolution. And as per I can experience that poetry helps us improve our cognitive function, like learning new words, finding new ways to articulate our thoughts and then feelings. And always we think about to better ourselves, right? And then it also helps to heal our emotional pain. Grief is something which is the most painful emotions we experience, and it's also the source of some of the world's most inspirational poetries. And now we can relate that how poetry also relate to help our emotional pain, and also we get to know ourselves better through poetry, through the medium of poetry. Like self-awareness is also one of the most thought provoking thoughtful and one of the most fruitful results of poetry only. Through poetry, we are trying to change ourselves, even if all the mistakes we do, all the errors we have done in the past, we change it through the ways of poetry. Whenever we are writing poetry or making ourselves better, we try to think that those things which we have done, we are not going to repeat that on this time, and we also become very much revolutionary. We try to think revolutionary changes in the society, and also make ourselves rebel that we should not keep on running these stereotypes, such dogmas, and which we are suffering from, and we do not let those happen, and we always protest. So in my ways, that poetry, not in all ways, but in some ways help to create a revolutionary society, or helps to create a revolution in our day-to-day life and in our surroundings. As we all know that Renaissance, we have all heard this word about Renaissance, as Renaissance was related to art, culture, and literature, and all those creative things which we try to do to engage ourselves in day-to-day life. And what Renaissance was a thought process revolution, right? With the changes of thought process, with the rectification of thought process, we have changed this society. Our society has emerged into a better version of itself from the past. So yes, through art, or through poetry, or through poets, or through the creators, we can see that poetry is working wonderful in this society, and it is creating a very better medium for us, or for this world, to be habitable and to be healthy.
Well, thank you. That was an excellent speech you just gave us. We're going to let a performer come on here. I believe his name is Uche. Are you ready to go, Uche? Let's get him up here on the spotlight and tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself, and then go into your work. We'll love to hear you. Looking forward to it. He's muted. Let's unmute himself. You need to unmute yourself.
My mic. Okay.
There you go.
My name is Uche from Lagos, Nigeria. So I go with my poem now. How do I pledge this love? How do I pledge this love with broken teeth and cracked finger at this early youth? Finding not one old wheelchair to move my dry gleam so free. You mine our farmlands in pipelines and decimals to censor the rest of our hoping existence, casting us away from our villages to your city garbages, leveling local markets for your supermalls, your supermarkets, your cinemas, and your cyber malls. No standing, no lottering. Keep walking, keep moving. So you teach us how to love and when to die for the country? Okay, free education, free education, free education. Your flags are flying, glued to our draft arms, unable to wipe tears of children in public schools, reciting your scripture tunes to your million manifest tunes. Come, do you think we are all fools? Okay, where are the waters? Where are the waters you drain from our rivers to filter those rugged molluets and keke napep you offered? Instead, our testicles are ignited in the same scarce petrol to be exploded in the headlines of your news lines. Now, my baby seas become effigies of littering carcasses in the streets, and you still come talking about another electoral policy? Please, give us our hearts back and let us decide how to start a new life. Thank you. That's my poem.
Wow. Incredible. Beautiful. You can do another one if you'd like. Okay, so let's see. We have another open mic performer here, I believe, Annette Tarpley. Would you like to read a poem for us? Introduce yourself a little bit and read a poem if you'd like.
Sure. I just realized I was never muted, so I hope I didn't say anything or clear my throat. I apologize. My name is Annette Tarpley. I'm from the United States and Virginia, and I'm a poet and writer, author. I am also the founder of the Passion of Poetry, and I'm very happy to be here and to be invited amongst you all. And I'm a little embarrassed to perform after that last performance because how can I possibly top that? So that was really great. And very insightful questions you're asking, Dustin, with great answers. So I have just a couple short poems that I wanted to share with you. One of them is one that I wrote the other day. It's a very simple poem, has a message. It's called Two Boys and a Ball. A ball rolled down the middle of the road, crossing enemy lines. Young boys the same age on either side ran toward it, avoiding the signs. Squeals of delight escaped their lips as they laughed and began to play. Their parents looked on in horror, shocked, at a loss for words to say. In the distance thundered sounds of warfare. Having fun, they ignored it all. Two innocent boys who knew not of hate continued to play with the ball. Looks of fear soon turned into smiles as their parents continued to look on. People from either side soon began to sing a lighthearted, familiar song. Tears escaped down the cheeks of the adults as they let out a gasp. Walking closer to the enemy lines, they joined hands and they tightly clasped. Soldiers looked on with their munitions tightly held within their hands. Their hearts were touched by this gesture of love by two boys from opposing lands. The tale would be told for generations to come. Two young enemies had become friends. Tucking their boys into bed that night, their parents prayed the fighting would end. So that is, did you want me to share another short one, Dustin? Or
yes, please do.
Okay. I have another one, and I lost it because there it is. This is called Let Love Rain. I hear the pitter-pat of rain on the roof, humanity's tears in rhythmic play, waves that crash on beach sands, announcing nature's dismay. On earth still exists the hatred of men, resentments continue to sustain, harboring ghosts of the distant past, much to godly dismay. Amidst the turmoil within his mind, he has forgotten to let love reign, how to allow music within his heart to conduct in sweet refrain. Continuing in a world full of discord, a blunder full of folly, instead of ushering in a land full of joy, where man walks happy and jolly. It is said that it takes more effort to frown than to display a relaxed smile. Allow love in, let it rain, to be a mainstay for not just a while. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have another performance from the Ghoshal. Would you like to do one more poem with us? And mute. With your muted, Ghoshal.
Okay. Now, this poem is an exchange. It's a telephone conversation between I and a neighbor's daughter in Ukraine. And the poem goes like this. Ebe, 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 kangaga. A neighbor's daughter studying in Ukraine called me on the phone in clatters of tears in her voice, and she asked me, she said, why the war lingers when you have to go out of the house, watch both sides for angry military tanks, watch the sky for furious jet fighters, watch out for the next bombed building collapsing, watch again for missiles traveling like fireflies to burn down soldiers on foot. And even when you escape to the borders, for waiting, you see waiting racist attack. And when you call home telling them you're in danger, you need help, the next thing you hear is, now who sent you go Ukraine? Who asked you to go to Ukraine, all the way to Ukraine to study? I felt so sorry for her. And the next thing I said is, sorry, my sis. But here in my country, without a war, if you have to go out, look left and right for deadly Okadas before they knock you off to death. Look ahead for stray bullets from angry policemen rifles. Look again for collapsing story building due to negligence from local workers. Look behind you for another bandit attack to kidnap children. Look again for this job advert of disguised ritualists. Look again for BLT buses that are not safe. Cringe. Why you lament about this? The next thing you hear is, why she go enter BLT for night? She don't know say she be woman. And she was shocked by my testament. And the next thing we decided was to stay indoors, shivering, but still praying to God, praying the next litany of Bible verses, hoping that our rescue planes would come and take us to where? She doesn't know. I don't know. Why? Because the world is burning. We need peace all over the world. We need justice. We need truth. We need peace in Ukraine. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wonderful message. Beautiful performance. Thank you so much for that. We definitely need peace all over the world, in Ukraine, everywhere. Thank you. So I have one last question for our panelists, and if anybody else wants to toss in their 2 cents to this question, it's kind of an interesting question for the entire group here. So there's kind of I know some scientific studies that have suggested this, or some data that's been pulled up that suggests this. Why are poets often less happy than other artists?
Well, Dustin, I said it before. Poets are idealistic human beings. We believe in perfection. We want order in the world. We want everything to go on according to the way it should go. But we all know that right out there, things are not perfect. And then there comes the collision between realism and idealism. I think Wang talked about this a while ago, and but for me, I believe that why poets are not as happy as other people is because we poets, we believe that the world should be in a very idealistic way, but out there, we know that the case is not. And then, how do we now come to terms with this situation? And this is why poets usually are not happy with what goes around them. For me, having done a few things apart from writing poetry and writing fiction, I've been in politics, I've been in government, I've been a medical doctor in practice, and I've been now an administrator of writers. And I try to balance all these things because I believe that poets need to balance issues. If you want to make yourself a little happier, you got to. I'm not saying you should bring down your standard. I'm not saying you should not be writing all those beautiful poems and looking at the stars and the moons and the meadows and the valleys. But at the same time, you have to come down to earth. Well, this is it. Thank you.
Jing, did you want to say something? I thought you had
Yes,
something
I
to
was
say.
typing. Yes, I was typing. Anyway, I just think by default, poets are super sensitive. They're more like they're like as the doctor said, they're perfectionists, they're idealists, they're dreamers. They're more sensitive to realities than other people. So they're constantly find things that makes them unhappy, and this is also the motivation for them to write.
Very true. It's sort of a double-edged sword. Was ZM or Wang? Would you like to add anything to that?
Come after you.
I'll go after.
Me? Okay, sure. I'll make it very short. Perhaps I actually have been wondering about that, why we're happy. Maybe because we're among the poorest, because poetry is the one of the except for a few elite poets who can make really good money, and poetry cannot make money. Poetry is very difficult to enter the main stream of money-making commercial, river, right? And that forces us to constantly question ourselves, why am I in this losing money business? Right?
Right. Why is it such a passion? Why does it consume us daily?
Right. Why do we keep going at it, right? And that comes back to when I first landed on Tibet, right? And when there's no tree, no greens, just like thin air and a massive land, right? And a blue sky, right? And the pain, how to breathe and how to walk for the first time, this kind of sensation, right? And I just felt after that journey, I came back transformed. I felt like a new person, and I've never felt so happy. And I constantly thought about that, thought back to it. Why? Right? And finally I connected poetry and Tibetan, the bare bone living experience, right? That it made me realize all the extra, the fame, the rich, power, they are basically, as I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, right? And they are actually illusions, right? What is really real is that our connection with what is like the living existence, like why we're living here on this earth, right? Through poetry. And that's what, and why we are alive, And that's what keeps us strong and happy. Thank you.
Absolutely. ZM, would you like to add anything?
Yes, definitely. So there's this, I hesitate to say syndrome, but they call it the Sylvia Plath syndrome or Sylvia Plath effect, that explains that poets are they're at the forefront of the of writers who take their own lives. They die by suicide, and which is unfortunate. I don't know where they gathered such statistics, but I think we are a naturally sensitive bunch. We, as I said before, we view the world in a very altered way. We certainly possess our own artistic minds, and the way we view everything before us is altered. And I do think that due to both capitalism and modern society, and perhaps society in general over the years, many have been discouraged from continuing their craft because of financial sustenance. But for me in general, it's art for art's sake. I'll be quite honest, I don't think I could write manuscripts. I don't think I could write collections of poems or stories or whatnot in order to pay rent, pay for my light bill, because then the passion itself is stripped away from it, and now this is your way of life. Now this is how you're dependent. That's why I don't think I could ever write full time in general. I love editing. I love being on the other side of it. That I can see myself doing full time, but it's a very curious question there. But I can't speak for everyone. Certain poets I've met couldn't exhibit more positivity if they tried. So that's
very interesting conundrum that poets tend to be like so optimistic about life, and yet in our private lives sometimes we're very depressive and negative in our life. A lot of times I know I can be that way a lot. Suchismita, would you like to add anything to that question?
For me, sir, poetry grows when we actually face some certain incidents in our life. We get to write after that. And what I think that poets are dissatisfied or somewhat less happy because they are always dreaming of a better life, better surrounding, better partner, better what should I say, better creatures, beautiful world, and all those dreamy things are always in our mind. We always try to correct things, and we are super sensitive, as ma'am Jing Wang ma'am said. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced. So what I think that we do not get any contentment in our work. Like we are not, we have never had enough of our work. Like if we are creating something one day, we feel very much happy that the entire world seems so beautiful, and the next minute or the next day or a stretch at a stretch, if we are not creating something, it feels like we try to point out all the wrong things, like why he's not like that, why the society is not doing this in a way, and why we are not so commercially successful, why people are so emotionally vacuum. All these things come into our mind, and whenever we create something and our dissatisfaction of never getting enough of our work makes us to reach to our next work, which will get very much good, and we will get like, wow, this is a wonderful surprise in my life, and I am happy now. We became less happy because we always search for good things or something better than our previous things, and it somewhat makes us like less happy or less satisfied, because creativities are always about, we are always on the search of better things. Like if we are trying to sing a song in a better way, we are writing a poetry in a better way or something like that. We are always into experimenting, and when this experimenting gets into our blood, it becomes a habit, right? It gets on our nerves, like we have to do better things, we have to search for better things. And now the condition, if what we are living into is not a good condition, we have to get into the better condition. That is why our brain works in this way, and we feel like, yes, most of the poets are thinking in this way, that we have to create better only. And that is why we are less happy or somewhat not feeling the right way. Even if you ask me one day, how are you doing, Suchismita, I will tell that I'm doing very good, sir, because I have written this things, and I have achieved these things, And then the next day, if you ask me, then I will say that I'm doing just okay and not that great, because I have not created something great today. It will definitely be the reason. So this is how poet's brain might work, and we feel in this way.
Very restless people sometimes. And then I think we've covered a lot of ground in this seminar. And I want to thank Poets Aloud for initiating this project today. So we're closing in on the last couple of minutes of our event. Thank all to all 4 panelists and our performers today. So thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys are great, answered the questions wonderfully, and spoke very well. I think we learned a lot, and these been, I guess I asked some really good questions that challenged you, I hope, and we heard some great poetry, and we learned from each other. So if you guys are networking and all that on Facebook or wherever, just find each other and get in touch, and we'll keep in touch with you all. So this has been a World Poetry Today special from World Inkers Network, sponsored by Parrot TV and Poets Aloud. Thank you all for joining us. And if you missed anything, go back and watch from the beginning. And remember, you guys out there who are watching, you can donate to our program at paypal.me/nyparrot. And you can also be a part of our program as a featured guest if you get in touch with me, Dustin Pickering, at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. So I'm glad that we had this wonderful panel discussion with open mic performers. And thanks to all you guys who came out today and were here. So this has been a wonderful program. I guess you guys out there, and you know what I'm going to say? Get out there and do some writing. Excellent day. World Inkers Network. Have an excellent afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We Indian man.